You guys talk about old school goaltenders. For a few years in Carolina, we hired this goalie coach, Donnie Edwards.
Oh, I love Donnie Edwards.
Donnie Edwards. And
Buffalo.
Yeah. And so I find out, just kind of chatting with her, they're like, Donnie Edwards won a Vezina, you know? So I started calling Donnie Vezzy. So Vezzy skates up to me one day. We're skating around in practice. He's like, let's not make a big deal of this, but you want to tee it one day soon? I go, Vez, anytime you want to tee it, because it's just not like a normal thing to do, right? To go tee it with one of your coaches. And I'm thinking to myself after that convo, how good a golfer is Vez, our goalie coach? This guy shows up to Raleigh Country Club. He's got the senior PGA Tour slacks on with white FootJoy Classics and like a senior. And this guy stripes it around Raleigh Country Club like a god. He's a +2 mini tour player. And I fell in love with the guy. I'm like, Vez, anytime he was unbelievable. I'm like, Vez, anytime you want to play, let's tee it. We teed it all the time. He would come into town because he just would come in for a couple of weeks at a time or whatever. I'm like, you make sure you bring your sticks next time, and we'll play every day, Vez. He was a god.
That's outstanding. Wins of Vezina is a +2.
Yeah, and it just was a little secret like, hey, keep it low prof, but you want to tee it one day? I love teeing it. And I was thinking, I'll do the guy a courtesy favor, and he's probably going to blow it around in 120. The guy was a stick, Vez, and we fell in love with each other.
Yeah.
He was a great, like if he saw you in a restaurant having a cocktail or something, he'd just come by, sit down, have a conversation, nothing to see here, and away we went.
There's nothing better than ambiguous golf, like great golfers, guys who you
never think.
You look at him and be like, this guy is going to be an absolute disaster, and all he does is stripe the ball down the middle of the fairway.
Dude, he's a god. He was a god. I loved playing golf with Donnie Edwards.
Edwards.
There's this. I go to
your idol growing up, Noodles, or what?
Well, no, I loved him. There's a lot of old goalies that I like, in my wheelhouse of guys that I looked up to or watched growing up. Mike Liut was one of them. I really liked Mike Liut.
Donnie Edwards.
But Donnie Edwards, Donnie Beaupre. Off air, I was telling Hayes, I got to know Kenny Raggett a little bit.
Yes.
Because
he'd
come back to Lethbridge. I got to skate with him one time when I was 14 years old. They needed another goalie, and they were like, hey, come on out. And Kenny Raggett was there. It was awesome.
You know what's wild about that? I was looking up Donnie Edwards because I wasn't familiar with his game, golf or hockey.
There's a crazy story about his parents. Do you know that whole story?
I do not know that.
That's awful.
I'm simply looking at his hockey DP.
Okay.
He's 5'9", 165 pounds. Which speaks, again, the guy won the
Tiny
Vezina,
goalies,
5'9", 165. He's from Hamilton.
Yeah.
And he had a cup of coffee with the Leafs in 85-86.
Donnie Edwards?
Donnie Edwards and Ken Reggett was on that team.
Wow.
So Kenny Reggett,
my favorite
Donnie
goalies.
Edwards, there's a Venn diagram, and there they are right in the middle.
Wow.
I'll guarantee you that Vez went up to the National and shot 68 for fun, and then probably backed up that night.
That's great.
I'm telling you, man, he had do you know the senior tour slacks with no belt? It just goes, and he had the collar. He was so dialed in, man. He was like a mini senior tour player, and we fell in love with each other, man. We just started teeing it all the time. Then he started coming out with other guys. It was the best.
That is outstanding. I'd love to know the analytics on that. How many guys have played tough courses on a day game when they're backing up? It's perfect for a goalie, a pitcher, right? If you roll into town.
I think Fierzy used to tee it up when he was starting.
Well, Fierzy, there's a legendary story, and we'll have to ask Grant one of these days, but he shot 51 holes in a Stanley Cup final. He was playing that night. Instead of morning skate, he just went and did the course a couple times and teed it up.
Yeah.
And teed it for till noon and then went and slept and played that. I think it was Game 7 against Philly. He did that.
That's the kind of stuff that legends are made of.
Yeah.
Right? There's the famous Michael Jordan stories where he'd play 45 in his sleep.
Drink 9 beers.
Drink beer, smoke 5 cigars, and go hang 45 points on a team.
Yeah.
I remember hearing stories. I mean, you guys would know better than I would, but when the Coyotes first went to Arizona, there were players that went down and they're like, I can't stop playing golf.
Well,
they're like, I have to play golf. It's like, man, we got a game tonight.
You can
like, I have to go play.
You can speak to this because when teams would go to Arizona, like guys we'd go on a trip. It's like, hey, we're doing Arizona, we're doing San Jose, and like there's guys that would give the trainers their bags, like their golf clubs.
I would never take my clubs, but I always carried my suits because I didn't have one of those big giant suit bags. I just had like the garment bag a suit shop would give you. And right in the front, I'd have my putter tucked right into it and just zip it up and away you go.
Pair of golf shoes in the duffel bag. And
that's it.
But we had Whit Merrifield on like last month. Remember, Whit was saying he'd go play all the time.
Yeah.
He starts listing. You weren't on that day.
It's just amazing that, like, the trouble you can get into as an athlete. And, like, if you get caught golfing, it's like, I remember so many times it's like the text message would be, make sure you don't wear the golf shirt or the shorts in for practice. Just wear normal stuff, and then we change. It's just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like you're golfing.
Right.
Exactly. If you're playing 36 a day, like in between games, maybe that's a little too much golf. But riding around in a cart playing golf, like, give me a break.
Yeah, come on now. Especially if you're out there with a coach, right? You're talking about the game. You're out there game planning with Vez. All right. Speaking of Hamilton, which is the home of the aforementioned Vez, was also the home of the Grey Cup yesterday. And I'm not sure what I was anticipating. I mean, a lot of the chatter was about Winnipeg, how they've dominated the West for years. They've been in the Grey Cup every year. They were a big favorite. It turned out to be a great game and a spectacular fourth quarter. And I thought Montreal was the better team. They ended up winning. I think they were sensing some disrespect going into the game. But to set the scene, to look back on it, he had the call. It was a great call, especially that final touchdown was phenomenal last night. Great theater on TSN. Here's our main man, Rod Smith. How you doing, Rod?
Oh, hey, it's good to talk to you again. Oh, Noodles. It's been a while.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun last night.
Yeah, it was an amazing game. I mean, you've obviously seen so many over your career. You've called so many. The back and forth, especially the late touchdown by Winnipeg, and then Montreal counters with like 15 seconds left on the clock. Like, give us some historical perspective from your standpoint, Rod. Like, how does that kind of match up with some of the great Grey Cups you've seen?
Well, the thing that always comes into effect here, Brian, is recency bias, because I remember like the day after so many times thinking, this is the greatest Grey Cup ever. Mm-hmm. And then after a while, then you realize, I mean, it's top five for me. And it's certainly, I mean, this is third straight year after Chris Cuthbert left that I've got to call him for TSN. And it's been the best one. And consider last year was that crazy Argo one, that fourth quarter where it ended in a blocked field goal. And then 2 years ago in Hamilton, it went to overtime between Winnipeg and the Ticats. So they've been close games. I mean, we've had three straight really, really close finishes. But this one was just, for perspective with Montreal, I mean, we've seen big upsets over the years. I mean, it can happen. I mean, David can take on Goliath and do it like on one day. One day anything can happen. But I look at Montreal. They went into the Eastern Final. Like, they finished 11-7. Mm-hmm. And their 11 wins all came against teams that were below them. All 7 of their losses came against teams that were above them, had better records. So that was the knock against them going in. And then Argos had swept them 3 straight. They go into the Eastern Final. Argos went 16-2, which is a record for wins. And not only did they beat them by 21. But then you got to go against Winnipeg, 4th straight appearance of the Grey Cup, and they won 14 games. Back-to-back upsets like that. I can't recall seeing one team do that. They just caught lightning in the bottle. They were just red hot down the stretch, and they deserved it.
Roddy, do you think that's something special about the CFL? We were talking at the beginning of the show where it seems like, and I lived it going to the Stanley Cup final with Carolina, where the Cinderella it always kind of fizzles out when they get to the top of the mountain and they don't get it done. But you see the CFL, you can get over the finish line, and it's kind of a nice story. Although it might not be the popular one, it's a great story.
It really is, though. It's the cliche is anything can happen, but that's the one thing I've really enjoyed about the league. I mean, there's been some goofy things that have really gone on too. I remember, like, this goes back to the early '80s. Ottawa, they were the Ottawa Rough Riders, and they finished 5-11, and they kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and they nearly beat one of the greatest teams in history, Edmonton, in their dynasty. And some people thought, this is ridiculous. You can't have a champion, with only 5 wins. But as an Ottawa guy, I was loving it at the time, and that was one of the things I liked about the CFL, that anything can. Now, Montreal was deserving of being there. They went 11-7. They had a good team, they just were, slotted in behind the greats of like the Blue Bombers and the Argonauts. But yeah, it's one thing. I've loved the league all my life. I've followed it all my life, and that's one of the things. Even in a 9-team league, I mean, just to know that one team just gets hot at the right time, and that's we see that in hockey too. We've seen it in baseball. I mean, you get hot, you're the team to beat, and it just happens. It was kind of cool to see.
So, did you take a break at halftime, or did you go check out the band?
Noodles. I just stayed in my perch up there at Tim Hortons Field, and I enjoyed it. That was a good show.
Great.
Awesome.
I mean,
Love
yeah.
Green Day.
I mean, yeah. I didn't. I became kind of a Green Day fan just through my kids. Both of my boys, they had, this is 20 years ago. They had the CDs and everything else, so I knew a lot of that music and really appreciated it. And it was, I really enjoyed that concert. That was fun. But yeah, I just watched it from where we were.
That's the beauty of it, right? Like, it seemed like a great crowd last night. Obviously, from our standpoint, like, we talked a lot this week or last week about the Argos throwing away what could have been maybe the greatest season of all time. I mean, everyone had their own view on that, Rod. I'm sure you did as well. Like, if they go 16-2, get through the East Final, win the Grey Cup, and, the Alouettes, it kind of felt like they had a chip on their shoulder, because even after they go into BMO Field and dismantle the Argonauts, which is what they did, they ran away with that game. The story was Chad Kelly throwing picks, turnovers, the Argos puked, as opposed to the Alouettes going in to win it themselves. And then even going into the game yesterday, the Bombers like an 8.5-point favorite. Everyone's picking Winnipeg to run away with the game. And it appeared to be a part of their inspiration anyway. I mean, how much of a factor do you think that played in how Montreal responded yesterday?
Huge. You could sense the anger. And us versus them, everything, versus all the rest. That's another one that's been around a while in all sports, but you could feel it with Montreal. And a feeling of disrespect. And it's, you look at their head coach, Jason Moss, who got fired as the offensive coordinator by Saskatchewan, and the Riders didn't get in the playoffs again this year, and then they have to see their former OC that they let go be a Grey Cup, winning head coach. And then Cody Fajardo, their quarterback, kind of off the scrap heap too. I mean, he didn't even know if he was going to play anymore, and he decided to go and join Moss again in Montreal. But those kind of stories, and he was the one that he kind of likened it arriving there. He didn't know too many people to the island of misfit toys. I mean, they just kind of fit together. There was a lot of new faces, and it took them a while to gel, but they did. And I don't think people realized, how special that was for them as a team as they united. I did a lot of their games, and I still wondered about them against, as I say, the teams above them. But they just had great team unity. I mean, they had just things like putting a pickleball court in their dressing room. They were doing all kinds of stuff like that. Moss had great ideas to get them to spend more time with each other. And you could just feel how galvanized they were. That was a really tight-knit team at the end. And you could see that in that championship, even when they were behind, by 10 at the half, and they could have cut the lead and they didn't. They were saying they were. I don't think they were too wavered by that. I think they felt they could come back and win, and yeah, they did.
Roddy, Zach Collaros was upset after the game, but it looked more of like a more upset than just losing the game. Do you think that the personnel there is going to change drastically, and it's like the last gasp for that group? Because it seemed like more than just being upset at the loss.
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and there's going to be a lot of questions about Winnipeg in the off season. I mean, that's one of the great teams. That's a generational team that went to the Grey Cup 4 straight years. They won the first 2. They lost to the Argos by a point last year, and then they lose this one, with just an incredible touchdown pass with just seconds to go. And so they can argue. I mean, they could easily argue they should have won 4 in a row. But at a certain point in time, some of their core players are getting older. And you could see it, although, Adam Bighill, like their star middle linebacker, is in his mid-30s, and he was hobbled by a leg injury, and he gave it a go, but he clearly wasn't 100%. But some of those guys, I mean, they've had a great run. I'm not saying it's over, but you do have to wonder if they're going to have to make some changes just to stay on top, because that, as I said, this is a team that's done a great job of staying together, and it's been an amazing 4-year run, really, and over the course of 5 years, because they canceled the season in 20 because of the pandemic. But I don't know. There are other teams. BC's getting good. Other teams are retooling. I mean, it's always harder to stay on top, right? I don't know. I'll be curious to see if Winnipeg can keep this run going. But it's been a remarkable team to watch, and they were favored. They deserved to be favored.
Yeah,
but it was they were just up against a really hot team.
With Rod Smith, well, it is amazing how, like, in the end, Montreal gets to go home. They win the Grey Cup. They get the parade. It's their season in retrospect. Yet the Argos were 16-2, needed 2 more wins to possibly go down as the greatest team in CFL history, or the greatest season in CFL history. And like you just mentioned, Winnipeg, basically final plays, final drives from winning 4 straight Grey Cups. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about them the way we talk about Edmonton in the 80s. Like, it's that close.
Yeah, it really is. Edmonton won 5 in a row. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Calgary had a team like that too. The Stampeders won in 14 and 18, and in between, they lost in 16 and 17. Talking to Bo Levi Mitchell about this, was with us on our team on the weekend. But they were the team to beat in 16 and 17. They would have had 4 and 5 years. So I mean, there have been some really good teams, but Bombers are still. I lots of respect for Mike O'Shea and that whole organization, what they've done. They've been the class of the CFL, but it's just in the last couple of years. A couple of teams, the Argos last year and Montreal this year, have found a way to beat them in the biggest game of all, and it's been a treat to see how it's played out. I don't care who wins. I just want to see a good close game, and boy, that was a treat to watch, a treat to call. Last night.
Well, you did a great job as always, Rod. Congrats on just an amazing season. It culminated in what was really a memorable Grey Cup. It was an awesome game last night, and I'm sure you're a bit groggy today, as a lot of people would have been there last night. But we appreciate you finding time for us today.
Well,
thank you for this.
Hey, thanks, Brian. The voice is a little raspy, not from the game, from the rap party afterwards. But anyway.
Absolutely, as it should be. One of the best parties of the year. Thank you, Rod.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
There's Rod Smith joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota, and check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory. Arriving daily, it's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com.
I wonder if the Tat Man was kicking around.
The
there.
parties are always. I didn't hear many stories this year. Like in past years, we've heard some wild stories about the media party and the
remember
build
we
up.
did the show from that hotel, and there was
We're at the Royal York.
There was
a horse. Well, they wouldn't let the horse in. And then
there was a horse in the lobby.
Yeah.
They were trying to force feed a horse. It was Stampeder fans.
That's right. It was Calgary fans. That's like the tradition. The guy shows up on the horse. He walks into the lobby of the hotel. And that really became a clash of Toronto versus the rest of the country, right?
Well, you had some Calgary, Western rednecks like rolling in on a horse.
Well, and they weren't alone because in Saskatchewan they're like, this is cool. In Winnipeg it's cool. In Edmonton it's cool. And it gets to Toronto and they're like, you're not bringing a horse in here.
Yeah,
this is the Royal York. Like, what do you think we're running
were on the
here?
second floor. Were we on the second floor?
Yeah. Oh, you could hear the commotion though, and they were like, it was like a mob scene down there. They were freaking out. Let the horse in. The horse was getting all like jittery.
The horse was getting worked up. Yeah. Yes.
It was a wild scene. That was for the 100th anniversary. I think that would have been probably in 13?
It was a while back.
It would have been, I think it was like 10 years ago.
It was, like, think about that, though. If you're not expecting that, it's just like, go away, bud. Like, go
well,
away
and that's what would have happened. Like the doorbell or what, the guy at the door is like, I just punched in. I don't know what you're talking about.
Weren't we at the Royal York?
Yeah, we're at the Royal York.
It was a white horse that they were trying to ride into the hotel lobby.
It's 2012, yeah. Yeah, it's tradition, man. That's Grey Cup tradition. I'm assuming that happened in Hamilton, but at the Royal York, he got denied. I think eventually they let the horse in. I think later that night.
Lay some plastic down or something?
Yeah, I think later that night it was like, let's just let the horse come in, keep the tradition alive. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like that was the case.
I don't think that. I think they would say no horse.
Well, originally, for sure, that was the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider, coming up. Something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza, coming up as well. And it's about William Nylander. We've been tweeting about it. Twitter's a buzz about Nylander. Listen, the guy's got points in 17 straight. He's got 27 points on the season. He's got, I think, 6 more points than anyone else on the Leafs. Like, he's lapping Matthews and Marner and Tavares. They're all off the good starts, and William Nylander's crushing it right now. So, back into the Leaf weekend. A number of stories in the NHL with Pierre LeBrun. We'll get to something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza as well, and our best bets later this hour. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, something to chew on is brought to you by Boston Pizza's new square footer pizzas. BP is reinventing the wheel with our 3 new square footer pizzas, an entire square foot of more cheese, crunch, and taste. These new pizzas are an absolute must-try at your local BP tonight. And we've been asking people online. Everyone's being very reasonable. Very reasonable. Will William Nylander finish
Why'd you go there? Why did you go there?
finish as a candidate for the Hart Trophy? All right, we're asking 4 options here. Yes, most definitely. She's only getting 8.7% of the vote. Very likely. She's getting 21.5%. Unlikely but possible, 55%. And low chance is 14%. I would vote unlikely but possible.
Yeah, I'm in that 55.
Right.
But, I mean,
he's almost 20 games
start.
in, and he's in the running right now.
So
he's got to do it 3 more times, though. That 20-game segment, that's got to be 3 more segments like that.
Yeah, exactly. You got to in going back to this, I didn't get to weigh in. You were on fire. O was on fire. I kind of, just kind of sat back. My question is, where people are yelling numbers, regardless of where you are. If you're on, 8, 9, 10, 12, whatever, 13, where were you 17 games ago? As far as coming into the season, what did you feel his number was? If you're, we're just talking our opinion.
Right.
I'll tell you where I was. I was like Timo Meier, Matthew Tkachuk. It's like if you're a good player in this kind of category, and then it just, what did you say, 17 games of this season we're in?
Yeah, we're 17 games in.
17 games in. He's gone from that category of a player to just under Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, and Austin Matthews. That's where we've gone in 17 games, and I'm like, I don't know. And by the way, I need to clarify that I'm not upset about anything, or we're not, dogging on the Leafs or they've just won 4 games. It's just kind of really become a bizarre situation where it's like, I don't know. It just has become, it's taken on a life of its own. It really has, with people saying what he deserves. And I mean, we're going to talk to Pierre soon about rival GMs weighing in. It's like,
well, yeah,
I don't know. I don't know why it's not like the Timo Meier and it's Matthew Tkachuk and it's normal. And now it's just this animal. I don't know if it's because it's Toronto or what, or this is where you come to make over $10 million. It just seems to take on a life of its own.
Brian, I thought you made the most polarizing but correct argument, is because this market, you've lived here your whole life, and you were talking about how this, this seems to be on steroids, whatever it is, the narrative, and then you add on to it because of how noisy the fan base gets. I look at it the other way. I try to look at it from the outside and go, okay, he's had an unbelievable start. He had a great season last year. What is the peak of this player? That's what I keep trying to figure out. What is the peak? And you pay for that. But also, he is going to be unrestricted. So he's got, a little bit of leverage there, too.
Well,
right?
exactly. And listen, he's having the best 17-game run I've ever seen him have.
Of his career, yeah.
Yes. And, remember after the first couple of games, Matthews had back-to-back hat tricks, and we were 5-6 games in, and we were saying, man, if it weren't for Matthews, where would they be? Well, it's flipped. If it weren't for Nylander, quite literally those 2 games over the weekend, that was the William Nylander show. That third period against Detroit, that's him. That's him. He secured them 2 points.
Yeah.
Not Bertuzzi, not Tavares. William Nylander did. He closed it yesterday. The guy is on just an incredible heater. But he's been with the organization for almost a decade.
They know what he is.
They know exactly who he is, what he is. They've been on public record saying their top priority is signing William Nylander. So from a Leaf perspective, I don't think 17 games has changed anything. Now, the player, it's a business decision. He can make whatever choice he wants to make, right? In the future, he can do whatever he wants to do.
Right.
But if he really wants to be here and, then at some point, they're going to have to come to a number that makes sense.
Yeah,
exactly. At some point, there needs to be a line where the Leafs are like, well, we just can't go there. It's not that we don't like you, but you're outpricing yourself. Right. And if that happens and he leaves, then that would be too bad.
Right.
But the house of cards isn't going to collapse because of one player.
Right.
That's another part of this. The Leafs will still continue to exist and keep playing. Just like the Washington Nationals did when Bryce Harper left. Yeah. There's been a long list of great players that have walked because the deal just wasn't there. I hope that doesn't happen because I love the story of Nylander, Matthews, Marner all coming in together, all growing together, all rewriting the record books here in Toronto and hopefully eventually winning. But if that doesn't happen, then his career will go on and the existence of the team will go on. Here's Pierre LeBrun, our TSN hockey insider. How you doing, Pierre?
I'm all right. Just in the car, shockingly driving to a hockey practice. The North York Storm.
Yes.
Girls hockey team has a practice.
Awesome. Shout out to the Storm. We love that.
Love it.
Okay. Do they have money for William Nylander on their cap structure? What have you done here, Pierre? You're talking to rival executives and some guys saying
like,
that
of course these rival GMs, Pierre, are going to say, oh, yeah, give him 15. Like, what are these guys saying? Like, why are they trying to cause problems?
Well, obviously you didn't read the piece, O'Dawkins. That's not what they said.
Tell me what they've said. Tell me what they've said.
So I think you've been caught there. No, and actually the interesting part of the exercise, and I'm not sure I could have predicted this, was the variance in the answers from these dozen executives. I thought there would be a closer consensus on what a guy like this is worth and what's a fair contract. And I think it's important, too, to point out what the exact question that I had for all these guys, and it was, what is a fair contract for William Nylander? So I think that's important to point out. It's not like I asked them, what's his max value? That's a different question. But the interesting thing in the answers is that I got quite a range thrown back at me. From some guys in the 9 to 9.5 range a year on a max term deal, to other guys going all the way to 11.5 to 12 million.
Right.
$3 million, $3.5 million is a big difference. And I was surprised by that. I was surprised at how differently different people viewed him. Given what he's done here the last year and a half. So that's number one. And the reason why that's revealing to me, because these are all people who run NHL front offices who, are in the same spot as the Leafs are with their own players at times. It's revealing because it tells me that not everyone agrees as to what William Nylander is right now.
Pierre, just to be clear, Pierre, is this what these gentlemen would say that they think he might get, or what they would give him?
It was really a mix. Again, my question was, what do you believe is a fair deal for William Nylander? And to your point, O'Dog, that's a good point that you point out. Some of them basically answered it as, this is what I think is a fair deal for him. And other ones tried to put themselves in the Leafs' shoes and say, well, this is what makes sense if you're the Leafs. So it's a mix of both in terms of the answers. But again, I honestly thought that it would be within the same range, and I got all kinds of different figures thrown at me. The other thing I would say that surprised me is that everyone assumed in their answers that it has to be a max term deal. No one has said anything to me, or I don't know, to you guys, but I think we've got to be careful to assume that. I mean, Austin Matthews didn't sign a max term deal.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to me too, that everyone automatically goes to the 8 years, where I'm like, who knows? We'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, Pierre, where, in reading your article, the one thing I was joking about kind of off air was, well, of course, these execs, they can weigh in because it's not their money. And they're laughing, going, give them $12 million because, again, it's not their money, and it would also mess with the Leafs cap structure. Now, I was shocked. I agree with you. I was shocked at how the range was, that people were comparing him to the Pasternak deal, where Pasternak had 61 goals last year. And, that, to me, that's too rich. I'm sorry. I love the player. I think he's having an amazing start. But again, Hayes brings back, we know what William Nylander is for the most part. He's not surprising the league. We know he's a very good player. We know he's had a great start. But you also have to put your business hat on and say, at what point is the max here for this player?
Right. And again, it's not a Nylander contract in a vacuum for the Leafs. Mitch Marner needs a new deal before 25-26.
Right.
All these things are intertwined. Now, obviously, Tavares' contract comes off the books, and if he remains elite, he's going to do so for less money. So there is that. And the cap is going up, of course, this summer. But all these things are intertwined, and yeah, I just thought it was. I honestly thought everyone would come in high at it, and it was interesting that some guys still had him at 9 and 9.5, and actually the contract that Pasternak was one for sure, but the other one that got mentioned a lot was Aho at 9.75.
Right.
Whereas one of the executives said to me, Aho wanted to stay a Hurricane. And so he had to play ball because Tom Dundon, right? So he signed for 9.75 when clearly Sebastian Aho is a guy that if he goes to open market can make more than that. And that's what it's going to come down to at the end of the day for Edmonton. I think you guys touched on this, but there's no question that William Nylander is pushing his leverage to the roof here. But at the same time, the fact that there's a salary cap in the NHL hasn't gone away for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he can score at will, but at the end of the day, the Leafs are still limited by what they can do under a salary cap. And if he wants to remain a Leaf, which he seems to be suggesting all the time to management, then the number that he's going to have to sign with in Toronto would be different than obviously the number that he probably could get on July 1st in a summer in which the cap is finally going up.
Right. I'm still waiting for that moment, Pierre. Some guy to say, man, they always say I love playing for the Leafs. 9's fine. I can live off 9. It's good for me, and maybe you can sign another guy. I don't know. That just doesn't seem.
Or the reverse of that is some guy to just hopefully it's not Willie, but it could be the threats. Well, I'll leave and get more. Well, no one's done that yet.
Go ahead,
right?
Do
no
it.
one's done that yet. How do you know that there's so much more out there? I mean,
I'll tell you a guy who did. Johnny Gaudreau left Calgary.
They got less,
and he got less. And I wonder how happy he is in Columbus right now. And
exactly.
I only mentioned that because obviously that involved Brad Treliving, but it also involved the agent,
Louis Gross.
Louis Gross. So again, that's no one's fault. I'm just saying all of this is so fascinating. Now again, the cap is going up this summer. But it's interesting. After my piece ran, I actually got more text messages from other teams, and one of the points that one guy pointed out to me is, why don't the Leafs ever get one of their guys to give them a break that way? That was what one of the guys said.
Never. Never.
Yeah. So let's see. I mean, it's Brad Treliving's job to get this to a number that makes sense for them. And obviously, William Nylander is a pending UFA playing the hockey of his life, has lots of cards to play here. Absolutely.
Well, and that's the thing about the roller coaster here, where Willie is having the best 17-game stretch of his career. The guy's he's incredible right now. He's truly one of the best players in the game, the most electric players in the game, and everyone's saying the same thing. Generally, from the outside of the market looking in, well, it's going up, going up. What if he goes on a 7-game pointless streak and plays poorly and gets benched? Do we tweet out, he's lost money now? Now he better beg for 8. Come on.
Be careful tweeting at me saying you can't win without him in the playoffs. They haven't won in the playoffs with him for crying out loud.
And that's, Doc, to your point, one of the executives that had him still at 9.95 and he said that the guy hasn't helped them win in the playoffs. That was his comment. So, again, it was all over the place with them. I mean, although another guy thought that he's taken the kind of step that the Leafs can't live without him. So it's really interesting.
And they've made it clear, right, Pierre? Like Brad Treliving has said on the record, our priority is to sign him. Like they're not playing hardball or saying, hey, you got to show us. They are very clearly trying to make something happen here. So it's not as if there's like bad blood or it's being disrespectful or anything like that. So.
Not at all. And in fact, I made the point at the top of my column. The fact that we've heard so little about the actual back and forth, and again, they've been going at it since June. But the fact that we've heard very little is by design. Both the agent and the Leafs front office have agreed to not play this out publicly and to keep a tight lid on things, and they have. I mean, there really are no details out there about offers and counteroffers now. All we know, as a matter of fact, is that the two sides consider this an ongoing dialogue. Nothing has gone off the rails. They both want to get this done. But if and when that happens between now and July 1st remains to be seen, and ultimately at what number. But, And again, you can't have this conversation without thinking about Marner as well, because that's coming.
Well, I just, you know what, Pierre, you bring up something.
And Tavares, too, I guess.
Well, Marner's coming up.
The next summer, they're going to be coming up.
Marner's going to be comparing himself to that. Like, it's always going to be something.
That's what I mean.
Pierre, you brought up something, and I just thought it was interesting. You mentioned, they're keeping it behind under closed, behind wraps, under closed doors, whatever you want to say it. Sorry.
Behind closed doors and under wraps.
You know what I mean.
We got you.
But you've got Zadorov's agent that goes public.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are you on with that type of situation? Because I prefer the Nylander route there. I prefer that you allow the manager and the agent to work instead of taking it public and then shining a light on the player, and then that it can be disruptive in the dressing room.
Totally. And the teams absolutely, NHL front office would prefer when agents are willing to play that card instead, where everything stays quiet. And to be fair, even though Johnny Gaudreau ended up leaving Calgary that year, in the lead up to that, it was pretty quiet during the season on the Johnny Gaudreau front. I don't know if you guys remember from following the coverage, but it's not like there were weekly Johnny Gaudreau updates in the Calgary media, because again, the agent and the GM here in question said, let's make sure we don't make this a gong show and deal with this when we have to, and they did. So that was, it was a pretty quiet story until the very end. And I think that's better for the player too. Let's be honest. I mean, because if stuff starts leaking out about what you're looking for, then you really have to answer for it. Whereas right now, William Nylander just playing hockey and really isn't answering questions about his future that often, which is probably the way he wants it. But then again, I don't think anything bothers that guy.
No, he's certainly not playing like it. Like he's been their MVP. He's been outstanding. And again, I think I said this a couple hours ago. In Toronto, and it's because it's always coming. It's always another deal, like you mentioned, once Nylander, if and when that gets put to bed, it'll be Marner, and it'll be Tavares, and then it just goes on and on and on. What the Leafs need to hope here is that Nylander, Matthews, Marner, everyone on that roster, the reason they're playing is not for a contract. The reason they're playing is because they're actually pissed off they keep losing in the spring every single year. Like, right. That narrative, again, doesn't follow other teams. I don't see down in Boston, they're saying, well, you know why they're doing this? Because Brad Marchand needs to get paid. It's understood.
Right.
They lost to Florida. They're pissed off, and they're going to go and redeem themselves. Where, again, Willie's not driving this. Nylander's not coming out and saying anything else.
Exactly.
But maybe, and hopefully what he's really doing is, sure, a contract year, of course, but we lost again. We keep blowing these opportunities. Maybe finally let's connect here as a team and put your best foot forward and actually try to win a Stanley Cup for the first time in a long time.
No question. And by the way, we should mention, out of fairness, the David Pastrnak negotiation last year did get a fair amount of attention in Boston. I would say more so than other negotiations in several years. Like that one was interesting because there was a sense of he's going double digits no matter what the culture is here cap-wise. And he did.
Yeah.
He got his money. I just want to point that out, that's not like no one was talking about it. But to your point, and I think this is where the Leafs, I think the timing should work their way actually on this, is that you can't sign Marner to an extension until July 1st, right? 1 year out from the expiry of his current deal. So the Leafs by then will know once again how this group has fared in yet another playoff test. And I guess what I'm saying is you will have more evidence to work with about this core before you make yet another major core decision. So that's good, because you'd rather know that, I think, before you go down that route again, don't you? I mean, to me, I'm not saying they shouldn't keep Mitch Marner. Of course, I think they should keep him, but at least they're not doing it, without having another major piece of evidence thrown at them next spring. And so that'll be important. The other thing I would say on Nylander, because he mentioned earlier, Brian, like, if you go 17 games without scoring, no one's going to say it didn't hurt his leverage. That might be true. I'll tell you, there is one risk that he is taking, though, by playing in his UFA year without an extension yet. And this doesn't get mentioned as often, but this is true for any player of his status, and that's not just him. But you run the risk of injury.
Yeah.
And this is why so many players actually do want to sign 1 year out and get that financial security, because it's a physical sport. And that is actually, on the player side, that is the risk you do take, and there's no way around that. That is a legitimate factor in this.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season the rest of the way here, not only in Toronto. I mean, the Canadian teams altogether, Pierre, we've been talking about it daily on this show. it has been a soap opera since opening night. Where, again, tonight, Edmonton's 5-10-1. They got Calvin Pickard playing tonight in net. Like, that's legit panic.
Dude, it's must-watch TV, though. I'll be like...
Yeah,
but
I was going to say, I haven't missed an Oilers game in quite a while.
Right. And they're on the East Coast, thankfully, so it's like a 7 o'clock puck drop. But I guess the point I'm making is the Nylander stuff, worthy of chatter, oxygen. I'm fascinated with it. I want to see where it goes. But the Leafs are 10-5-2, well into a playoff spot and fine. This is a story they can kick down the road. The Oilers are like a 5 or 10 game stint away from packing their bags and realizing their season's done. Like they got to get cooking here.
And I know we don't have too much time to spend half an hour on this, but the Oilers story, you want to talk about things being intertwined to another, it being intertwined to another. Like, there's so much riding on this season for that franchise. And I'm not saying it's cup or bust, but Leon Draisaitl has a year left on his deal after this year. I want to stress this here, and listen, I've not talked to anyone in his camp, so this is just my own opinion. But I don't think it's good enough to just somehow scramble your way back and make the playoffs if you're the Oilers and then lose out in the first round. Is that enough for Leon Draisaitl to think they're still a true contender? Like, there's more riding on this than that. I mean, I think this team has to get all the way back and win a couple rounds for, I think, everyone to believe they are who they are.
Well, somebody would come back at you, Pierre, and say, well, that wasn't the case for Austin Matthews. They got beat in the second round, and he found his way back to Toronto.
Yeah.
So people in Edmonton, like, they'll say, why are you hating on the Oilers? Because Austin Matthews is still a Leaf.
Yeah, no, and that's a good counter. And it may be that Leon Draisaitl doesn't want to leave because it's the only team he's ever played for. We'll find out. Actions speak louder than words, and he can make that call this summer. He's in for a huge race. We know that, no matter where that comes. But my point is, all these things are intertwined. I mean, Draisaitl and then McDavid's decision comes a year after that. Kenny Holland's deal is up as GM at the end of this year. There are so many things going on there now that this thing's gone off the rails that we wouldn't be talking about otherwise if they were just going swimmingly along like we thought they would be. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It is absolutely, it's by far the biggest story in the country, NHL-wise. Nothing's even close.
No question. All right, Pierre, go Storm. Have a great practice, and we'll do it again soon, buddy.
Right on. Big day Thursday.
Yes.
I'll be with my Cowboy peeps, and let's go.
All right, Packers-Lions. Packers pursuing a playoff spot in the NFC. They'll get it.
Yeah,
They'll set the tone early.
win.
Oh, it's
All
a lock.
right.
It's a lock. Thank you, Pierre. Go Packers.
See you guys.
Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider. Golf Town's Black Friday sale is bigger and better than ever, and it starts this Thursday, November 23rd, in-store and at golftown.com. Listen to First Up and OverDrive on Friday for your chance to win a $500 Golf Town gift card. Plus, if you follow us on Instagram at TSN1050, you'll have another chance to win at TSN1050 on Instagram. This is your chance to save on huge store-wide and site-wide deals from the top brands in golf like TaylorMade, Callaway, Nike, Garmin, and more. Visit golftown.com for all of the details. Get to our best bets coming up. I know a lot of people wondering, Hayes and Bro, we're on the Eagles plus 2.5. The line's probably flipped. They're probably favored by maybe a touchdown.
Because of the information
Because
you've
of the
played out?
information. Yes, because of the information. Check the line, Doogie. Let's see if it's shifted. Wouldn't be surprised. All right, our best bet still to come. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. We're on the Eagles plus 2.5. Not only Hayes and Bro, the whole show. Everybody, the whole show's behind this. Eagles take the points tonight. Jalen Hurts, anytime touchdown score. You know it's coming. The tush push will be alive and well at Arrowhead tonight. Patrick Mahomes, over 25.5 rushing yards. He's always sneaky. He always breaks out of a rush.
Dude,
Right.
I know you know this because you've been around the block.
Yeah.
KC could blow them out.
Yeah. Listen.
That's out there. That is out there. And what do you mean everybody? You're telling me Doogie loves your pick?
Doogie's a big fan.
Yeah.
Doogie.
Clapping
I'm
behind
getting
the
a
glass
standing
right now.
ovation
Yeah.
right now. Standing
Doogie,
ovation.
Doogie, speak up for yourself. Are you in agreement with this pick?
Go ahead, Doogie.
I think I am here.
Yes, thank
I
you.
believe I
Doogie.
am.
The voice of God, Doogie himself. The voice of Doogie. Doogie, you know, you're a smart man. You know what's up, right? You know what's going on.
I sure do.
Not a boy, Doogie. All right, that parlay paying plus 525. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Same-game parlays this NFL season now include passing touchdowns and receptions on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly, 18+, physically located in Ontario. You're not wrong, though. I will say the most terrifying bet in football is betting against Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
Like, there's nothing more terrifying, especially at home coming off a bye.
Dude,
I'm
shocked you did it. I'm shocked you did it.
It's almost stupid.
That's why we put that other dummy on your team, because you called him, and he said, I know what he did. He's like, what do you think about this? Because that's what he used to do to me all the time.
Yeah, he had some information.
Tremendous information.
He had very compelling information. It's I don't know, man. It's mesmerizing. Al's brother can sell. He can sell, but we're on the Eagles tonight. Hayes and Bro going for 3-0 to start the dynasty. And to wrap up, it would be a very successful week. All right, boys. Good stuff to everyone behind the scenes. Thanks for helping out. As always, we appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today, radio, TV, podcast, web, we appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy your games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
Go Eagles, 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.